I never thought I'd hear those words at my husband's funeral. Don't overdo it. Pack your bags and leave, my daughter-in-law Romy said, her voice cutting through the heavy silence that filled the room. My world tilted, the ground beneath me seemed to shift, and for a moment I was unsure if I was still standing. It wasn't just the death of Edward, the man I had spent over 50 years with, that broke me. It was the sharp callousness of Romy's words that shattered something deeper inside me. I had spent so many years quietly tending to my family, ensuring everything was in order, always in the background supporting everyone. But in that instant Romy had made it clear I wasn't needed anymore. I wasn't even part of the family anymore. She had taken over, and Edward, my husband, the person who had always stood by me, was no longer there to protect me. The funeral reception buzzed with the low murmur of guests, most of them not even glancing my way as I stood there, frozen. I could barely hear the conversation around me. My mind was still reeling from Romy's words, the coldness in her eyes as she spoke, the lack of empathy or understanding. It felt like the world had suddenly gone dark, and I was left standing in the shadows completely alone. I had hoped, foolishly, that after Edward's passing, my family would rally around me. I had hoped that they would hold me close, that I would find comfort in their company. But instead, Romy's words echoed in my mind like a cruel reminder that I no longer had a place in their lives. I wanted to scream, to tell her how much she had hurt me, to demand that she show some respect. But I didn't. I didn't because I knew that if I did, it would only make everything worse. Instead, I just nodded silently, my heart sinking deeper with each passing second. I turned and walked away, my feet feeling heavier with each step. I made my way to the quiet corner of the room, away from the crowd, away from the pitying looks, away from Romy. As I sat down, I tried to collect myself. It wasn't just about the words. It was about the years of neglect, of being pushed aside in my own family. Edward had been my rock, my partner, and now without him I felt like a stranger in my own life. My son Wade stood by Romy, offering me nothing but a hollow smile when our eyes met across the room. It was as if he had already made his decision. He had chosen her, and I was the one left behind. I sat in the silence, watching as Romy made the rounds, charming everyone with her forced smiles, all while I struggled to hold myself together. The funeral was meant to be a time for mourning, for remembering a life well lived, but for me it felt like a public humiliation. I was no longer part of the family's narrative. I was just an afterthought, a relic of the past that they were eager to discard. The more I thought about it, the more I realized how deeply this betrayal cut. Romy had always been controlling, but this was something else entirely. She wasn't just trying to take over the house or push me out of the way. She was trying to erase me completely. I had to fight. But how? What could I do when the very people who should have been supporting me were the ones who had turned their backs? I sat there, lost in thought, until I heard the faint sound of someone approaching. It was Wade, my son. He stood in front of me, his face tense, his gaze avoiding mine. Mom, we need to talk, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I looked up at him, trying to find some trace of the boy I had raised, the man who had once crawled into my lap for comfort. But there was nothing there. I know you're upset, he continued, but you need to understand. Romy is right. We can't keep the house. It's too much for you to handle. I stared at him, the words stinging like a slap. Too much? What was he saying? I had been managing this house for decades, long before Romy ever came into the picture. This was my home. You've changed, Wade, I said quietly, my voice shaking with the weight of all the years I had spent trying to keep this family together. You and Romy. You've changed. He didn't reply, just turned and walked away, leaving me alone in that corner. As I sat there staring at the empty space where my family had once gathered, I realized that I had to make a choice. I couldn't let them push me out like this. I wouldn't. This wasn't just about the house or the funeral or even Romy's cruel words. It was about my life, my dignity, and my right to be heard. I wasn't going to fade away quietly. I wasn't going to let them erase me. I had lost Edward, but I still had myself. And that, I realized, was enough to start over. It had been a week since Edward's funeral, and the weight of everything still hung over me like a heavy fog. I spent my days in the house I had once shared with Edward, trying to find something, anything, to do that might distract me from the suffocating emptiness that surrounded me. The silence was deafening. It wasn't the comforting kind of silence that one might find in a peaceful home. It was the kind of silence that made everything feel too big, too overwhelming. Everywhere I looked, I saw traces of him, his slippers by the door, his favorite chair by the window where he used to sit and read, the pictures on the walls that told the story of our life together. But now it all felt like a lie. A cruel reminder of everything I had lost, not just him, but my place in this family. I walked around the house as if in a daze, trying to fill the space. I dusted shelves, straightened pictures, and even watered the plants, but nothing seemed to bring the house back to life. Every task felt like an empty gesture. I could almost hear Romy's voice in the back of my mind taunting me. "Pack your bags and leave." It echoed through my thoughts, making me question everything. Was she right? Was I too much of a burden? The thought made my stomach turn, but I quickly shook it off. I had been managing this house for decades, and I wasn't going to let her drive me out. Not without a fight. I had to admit the loneliness was starting to get to me. Wade hadn't called, not even once since the funeral. It was as if he had already made his decision, choosing Romy over me just like that. The phone sat on the table in front of me, the silence between us growing with each passing day. I stared at it, willing it to ring, but it never did. It felt like a cruel reminder of how little I mattered anymore. I had spent years taking care of everyone else, cooking the meals, hosting the holidays, making sure the house was always warm and inviting. But now it felt like none of it mattered. I was invisible, cast aside like a piece of old furniture. A week passed before I finally got the courage to call Wade. The phone rang and I waited, listening to the sound of the dial tone. When he finally answered, his voice sounded distant, detached, like he was somewhere else entirely. "Hey Mom," he said, his tone flat. "How are you holding up?" "I'm fine," I replied, trying to sound stronger than I felt. "I just wanted to talk to you, Wade. About the house." There was a long pause on the other end. "Look, Mom," Wade said, his voice thick with discomfort. "Romy and I have been talking, and we think it might be best for you to move somewhere else. The upkeep on this place is a lot for you to handle, and we don't want you to be stressed out." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. He was agreeing with her. I could feel my heart shatter in that moment, but I kept my voice steady. "Wade," I said, my voice cracking slightly, "this is the house Edward and I built. This is where we raised you. It's not just a place to live. It's our home." He didn't respond right away, and for a brief moment I thought he might finally see reason. But then he spoke again. "Mom, I know it's hard, but it's just too much for you. Romy and we've been talking about it, and we think it would be better for you to move to a smaller place, somewhere more manageable." "And what about me?" I asked, the words escaping before I could stop them. "What about everything I've done for this family?" There was a pause on the other end, and I could almost hear him struggling to find the right words. "I don't want to do this, Mom," he said finally, his voice barely audible. "But we think it's for the best." "For the best," I repeated, my heart sinking. "For who, Wade?" "For you and Romy." I could hear his heavy sigh. "Mom, please understand. Romy and I want to start a family and we need the space. This house, it's too big for just the two of us." "So, I'm just supposed to leave?" I asked, my voice trembling with barely contained emotion. "Just like that?" Wade didn't respond, and in that silence, I heard everything I needed to hear. This wasn't about the house. It was about something else. Something deeper. They didn't want me. Not anymore. I had been nothing more than a burden to them, something to be discarded when they no longer had use for me. I felt a sharp pain in my chest, but I swallowed it down. I wasn't going to let this break me. Not yet. "I'll think about it," I said finally, the words tasting bitter on my tongue. "But don't think for one second that I'm going to make this easy for you." I hung up the phone without waiting for a response. The quiet in the house was suffocating now, pressing in on me from all sides. I walked over to the window, looking out at the garden Edward and I had tended together, the flowers still in bloom despite the chaos that had taken over inside. I took a deep breath and turned away from the window. I wasn't going to let Romy and Wade take everything from me. They might have taken Edward, but they weren't going to take my home. Not without a fight. The days following my conversation with Wade were a blur. I spent them in a haze, walking through the house like a ghost, my movements mechanical. Every corner held a memory of Edward, Every room echoed with the love we had shared. And yet, all I could feel was the growing distance between me and the family I had once thought would be there for me, no matter what. I kept thinking about that phone call with Wade, about how his words cut deeper than I had anticipated. He had sounded distant, as if I were a stranger to him. The son I had raised, the boy who had clung to me when he was scared, was now someone I barely recognized. I couldn't shake the feeling that he was no longer the person I had known. He had changed, and it seemed as if his loyalty now lay with Romy, the woman who had always been cold toward me. But it wasn't just that. It was the way they had so easily dismissed me, as though my presence in their lives no longer mattered. I thought of all the sacrifices I had made for this family, the years I had spent supporting them, holding everything together, and I couldn't help but feel a bitter sting in my chest. How had I gone from being the matriarch of this family to an afterthought, cast aside as easily as if I were a burden? I couldn't let that be my reality. I couldn't let them take everything from me, not without putting up a fight. So I did what I knew best. I kept quiet. I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I simply carried on with my days, keeping to myself, observing. The more I watched, the more I saw. Romy's presence in the house grew stronger. She took over the kitchen, rearranging things as if she had always belonged there, as if this house, which had once been a home for Edward and me, now belonged to her. I watched her every move, her careful manipulation of Wade, how she made sure he was always distracted when it came to me. The more I thought about it, the more I realized how much of this was orchestrated. Romy had never liked me, and I had known that for years. She had always tried to pull Wade away from me, making sure our time together was limited, our conversations brief. But this was different. She wasn't just pushing me out of their lives. She was erasing me completely. It wasn't just about the house. It wasn't just about the money. It was about control. She wanted everything Edward and I had worked for. And she was using Wade to get it. I had to act. I had to find a way to fight back. I wasn't about to let her take everything from me without showing her just how strong I could be. One morning as I sat at the kitchen table, I saw the stack of papers that had been left on the counter. They were scattered, as if they had been carelessly tossed there. My heart skipped a beat when I realized they were financial documents. Documents related to the house. Had always taken care of the finances when Edward was alive, but now it seemed Romy had taken over that responsibility as well. I reached for the papers, my hands trembling slightly as I sifted through them. There were notes scribbled in the margins, numbers that didn't add up, and contracts I didn't recognize. It was then that I knew. Romy had been planning this for a while. She was trying to manipulate the sale of the house, to secure her own future while leaving me with nothing. I could feel the anger rising within me, but I didn't let it take control. I had to be calm. I had to think clearly. I carefully folded the papers and set them aside, my mind racing with the possibilities. I had to make sure this didn't go unnoticed. I had to make sure the truth came out. That evening when Wade came home, I sat him down in the living room. I had made a decision. It was time to confront him, to make him see the reality of what was happening. Wade, I began, my voice steady but firm, we need to talk. He looked at me, his expression unreadable. What's wrong, Mom? He asked, his tone distant. It's about the house, I said, watching his face carefully. I know what Romy has been doing. I saw the papers. You've been planning to sell the house, haven't you? His eyes widened for a brief moment, but he quickly masked his surprise. Mom, we've talked about this. The house is too much for you to handle. It's just better this way. I shook my head. No, Guade. It's not just about the house. It's about you and Romy pushing me out of my own life. Do you really think I don't see what's going on? He opened his mouth to speak, but I raised a hand to stop him. You don't have to explain. I already know. What I don't understand is why. Why would you do this to me? Wade shifted uncomfortably in his seat, avoiding my gaze. It's not like that, Mom. We just want what's best for you. Romy is just trying to help. Help? I scoffed, the bitterness in my voice cutting through the air. She's not helping me, Wade. She's taking everything from me, and you're letting her. He finally met my eyes and I could see the guilt there, though it was quickly masked by his usual indifference. Mom, I don't know what you want me to say, he said quietly. I don't want to hurt you, but this is what has to happen. No, I said, my voice growing stronger. What has to happen is that you stop letting her control everything. This is my home, Wade. This was Edward's and mine. I'm not going anywhere. There was a long silence, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I saw a flicker of something in Wade's eyes. It was brief, but it was there. Regret. Guilt. A sign that maybe, just maybe, he still cared. But then just as quickly it disappeared. I don't know what to do, Mom, he said, his voice almost a whisper. I'm sorry. And with that he stood up and walked away. I sat there, staring at the empty space where he had been, the words echoing in my mind. I'm sorry. It wasn't enough. It would never be enough. I had to do this on my own. And I was ready. I spent the next few days in a haze, moving through the motions without really feeling anything. The house felt colder, emptier without Edward. It was the same place, the same furniture, the same pictures on the walls, but everything had changed. I kept telling myself that I would figure things out, that I wasn't going to let Romy and Wade push me out so easily, but the doubt lingered. They had already taken so much from me, my husband, my role in the family, my sense of belonging. And now it seemed like they wanted to take everything else. I knew I had to take action, but where to begin? I couldn't just sit here waiting for Wade to make all the decisions, waiting for Romy to take over every part of my life. I had spent years taking care of everyone, doing everything to keep the family together. But now it was clear I was alone. No one was going to fight for me except myself. The first thing I did was go through Edward's old papers. I needed to understand what had happened to our finances, our assets, everything that was supposed to be mine after he was gone. I pulled out file after file, each one filled with numbers, contracts, and legal jargon I didn't fully understand. But as I went through them, one thing became clear. Romy had been working behind the scenes to change things. I found documents that didn't match what Edward and I had agreed upon, contracts that had been altered, signatures that didn't seem quite right. I had to stop this. But how? I wasn't a lawyer, I wasn't a businesswoman. I was just a mother, a grandmother, someone who had spent her life keeping her family together. Still, I knew one thing. I wasn't going to let them take what was mine without a fight. I called a lawyer. I needed someone who could help me understand what was happening, and what my options were. I didn't care how much it would cost or how long it would take. I had to protect myself, my home, my future. When the lawyer arrived, we went over the documents together. His face grew more serious as we dug deeper. Mrs. Turner, he said after a while, these documents are troubling. It looks like there are several discrepancies here. Changes to the property titles, financial transfers that don't make sense, and signatures that raise a lot of questions. I felt a rush of emotion, a mixture of relief and anger. Finally, someone was acknowledging what I had suspected all along. Romy had been manipulating things to her advantage. What does this mean? I asked, my voice shaky but determined. It means that we need to look into this further. There are legal steps we can take to contest these changes, but it will take time. You'll need to be patient, but we can get you what's rightfully yours. His words gave me a glimmer of hope, but I knew the battle ahead wouldn't be easy. I had to stay strong. Later that afternoon, I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the pile of papers in front of me. The room was quiet, save for the sound of the clock ticking on the wall. It was as if time had slowed down, each second stretching out before me. I thought back to the life Edward and I had built here. The house wasn't just a building. It was the heart of our family. It was where we had raised our children, where we had celebrated birthdays, holidays, and milestones. It was where we had laughed, cried, and loved. Now, it felt like it was being taken away from me piece by piece. I couldn't let that happen. I wouldn't. As the days passed, I began to gather my strength. I focused on the things I could control, my legal case, my independence, and my dignity. I knew I had to fight for what was right, for what was mine. I wasn't going to let Romy have the upper hand any longer. I would make sure that Edward's memory, and everything we had built together, would not be erased. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that this wasn't just about the house or the money. It was about my place in the world, my right to be treated with respect. I had given so much of myself to this family, and now it seemed like they wanted to cast me aside like I was nothing. But I wasn't nothing. I was Margaret Turner, a woman who had raised her children with love, who had supported her husband through thick and thin, and who had earned the right to live out her years in peace. I would not be silenced. I would not be pushed aside. I had fought for this family before, and now I was going to fight for myself. I wasn't sure how long it would take or how difficult it would be, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going down without a fight. I would make sure that Romy and Wade understood that. They may have thought they could take everything from me, but they were wrong. I wasn't going anywhere. Not without a fight. I woke up the next morning with a sense of purpose that had been missing for weeks. The house, still filled with the echoes of Edward's absence, felt different today. I had spent too many days feeling like a victim, feeling as though the walls were closing in on me. But now I had a plan. It wasn't much yet, just the beginnings of something I could build on, but it was a start. I went through the motions of my morning routine, brewing the coffee, making my breakfast, but I couldn't shake the feeling that things were shifting. The house didn't feel as cold today. I could still hear the distant hum of traffic outside, but inside it was quiet, still like the calm before. A storm. I wasn't sure what was going to happen next, but I knew I had to stay focused. It was time to take control of what was rightfully mine. The legal documents had been my first step. My lawyer had assured me that there was a solid case to be made for contesting the changes that Romy had initiated. But I couldn't rely on the law alone. I had to make sure Wade understood that he saw just how serious this was. I couldn't let him believe that I was weak, that I would just give up without a fight. A few days later I got my chance. Wade called to ask if we could meet. I could hear the hesitation in his voice, as though he was unsure whether this conversation was something he really wanted to have. "Mom," he began, his voice faltering. "I think we need to talk about everything that's been going on." I agreed to meet him at a small cafe in town, a place where we used to go when he was younger, before everything had started to change. When I arrived, I spotted him immediately. He looked just like he had all those years ago, sitting there with that familiar look of uncertainty on his face. He stood up when he saw me, and I could see the exhaustion in his eyes. "I'm sorry about everything," he said as we sat down. "I know things have been hard for you, and I don't want to make them worse." His words were soft, but they didn't feel genuine. I had heard these kinds of apologies before, when I was still raising him, when he had messed up, when he needed something. "Wade," I said, cutting through the pleasantries, "I've heard enough apologies. I want you to understand what's really happening. Romy has been manipulating you, and you've let her. This isn't just about the house. It's about me, about what you and she are trying to take from me." He looked down at his coffee cup, not meeting my gaze. "Mom, I don't know what you want me to do. I'm trying to figure this out too. Romy wants what's best for everyone. She's just trying to help us move forward." I shook my head, my frustration growing. "No, Wade. You're not hearing me. She doesn't care about what's best for me. She's taking everything she can, and you're letting her." Wade's face flushed with discomfort, but he still didn't look up. "I don't want to fight with you, Mom," he muttered. "I'm not fighting with you, Wade," I said, my voice steady but firm. "But I will fight for what's mine. I've spent my whole life taking care of you, supporting you. Now it's your turn to see what's happening and make a choice. You can't keep pretending that I'm just going to accept this." There was a long silence between us, and I could see the weight of my words settling on him. He finally looked up, meeting my eyes. "I don't know what to say," he admitted, his voice small. "I feel stuck, Mom." I leaned in slightly, trying to make him understand. "You're not stuck, Wade. You're just afraid to see the truth. The truth is, Romy doesn't care about you or me. She only cares about what she can get. And if you keep letting her control everything, you're going to lose more than just the house." He swallowed hard, as though he were trying to process what I had said. "I didn't mean for it to happen like this," he whispered. I felt a pang of sympathy for him, but I pushed it aside. This wasn't about sympathy. This was about me reclaiming what was mine. "I know you didn't," I said, "but it's happening. And you're going to have to choose, Wade. You can either stand by me or you can stand by her. But you can't have it both ways." I watched as he sat there, struggling with his thoughts, his hands clenched tightly around his coffee cup. I knew this wasn't going to be an easy decision for him, but the truth was I wasn't sure I could ever forgive him if he chose Romy over me. I wasn't going to let her control my life any longer, And if it meant losing him too, then so be it. But I wasn't going down without a fight. After a long pause, Wade finally spoke. "I don't want to lose you, Mom," he said quietly. I'm just trying to figure out where I belong." I nodded, trying to keep my emotions in check. "I know, Wade. But you can't let her take everything from us. We've worked too hard for this. You have to see that." For the first time in a long while, I saw something in his eyes. Maybe it was guilt, maybe it was understanding, but whatever it was enough to make me believe that there was still hope for him. Maybe, just maybe, I could still get through to him. But I couldn't wait forever. The next move had to be mine. I had to take control. And I would. No matter what it took. The weeks that followed were a blur of emotions. Some days felt like they lasted forever, while others seemed to slip by in an instant. I had made my decision. I wasn't going to be the victim in this story. I wasn't going to let Romy or Wade make me feel small or insignificant. But taking control wasn't as simple as just making a decision. It meant putting that decision into action. I knew I had to be strategic. I couldn't just march in and demand things be different. I had to be smart, patient, and calculated. The first step was gathering more information. I had already seen the discrepancies in the paper of what I had fought for all these years. It reminded me that I was strong enough to do this on my own. With renewed determination, I made an appointment with my lawyer to go over the next steps. I wasn't going to sit back and let Romy take control. I wasn't going to let Wade be her puppet any longer. As I sat in the lawyer's office going through the documents, I could see how everything was falling into place. The papers Romy had altered were more than just fraudulent. They were designed to deceive and to take advantage of me. But now, with this evidence in hand, I had the power to fight back. The lawyer gave me a stern look as he explained the next steps. "We need to file a formal dispute," he said. "But this is going to take time. You need to be prepared for a long legal battle." I nodded, not flinching. I was prepared for whatever came my way. I had been fighting for my family my entire life. This wasn't any different. That evening I called Wade again. I could tell by the tone of his voice that he didn't want to talk. He had that same tired, defeated sound in his voice that I had heard so many times before. But I wasn't backing down. "Wade, I need you to understand something," I said, my voice calm but firm. "I know what you and Romy have been doing, and I'm not going to let it happen. I have evidence. I'm not going to be pushed out of this house." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Finally, Wade spoke, his voice quieter than usual. "Mom, I don't know what to say," he said. "I don't want to fight. I don't know what to do." I could feel a mixture of frustration and sadness building in my chest. "You need to stop letting Romy control everything, Wade. This is my home. It's where we built our life. I'm not asking for much. I just want what's rightfully mine." "I know, Mom," he said, his voice soft. I don't know how to fix this." "You can start by standing up for me," I said firmly. "By standing up to her. That's the only way we can fix this." I hung up the phone and sat in silence for a moment. I wasn't sure if Wade would ever fully understand, but I had to believe he could. I had to believe that the son I raised still had some of the values I had instilled in him. The days that followed were a test of patience. I continued to gather evidence, meeting with my lawyer and preparing for the legal fight that was ahead. Every time I thought about giving up, I thought back to that letter from Edward, and I remembered why I was doing this. I wasn't doing it for the house. I was doing it for me. I wasn't going to let anyone, not even my own son, take away what I had worked so hard for. And as the legal battle began, I realized that this was more than just a fight for the house. It was a fight for my dignity, my independence, and my place in the world. It was a fight that I wasn't going to lose. I had barely slept the night before. My mind kept running through the details of everything that had happened, the conversations, the documents, the lies. It was overwhelming, but there was no turning back now. I had made my choice, and now I had to follow through. The fight wasn't just about the house. It was about my pride, my dignity, my place in this family. I wasn't going to let Romy dictate my life anymore. And I sure as hell wasn't going to let Wade side with her, no matter how much I loved him. The next morning, I sat down at the kitchen table, the same place I had sat with Edward for years, and stared at the documents in front of me. They felt heavier now, more meaningful. These weren't just papers. They were my proof, my way of taking back control. I had sent copies of everything to my lawyer, and now it was time for the next step. I needed to confront Romy. She had to know that I was done being quiet, that I wasn't going to let her walk all over me anymore. I had always been the calm one, the peacekeeper. But this time I wasn't going to be passive. This time I was going to make my voice heard. The phone call came in the early afternoon, just as I had expected. It was Romy, her voice as sharp and cold as always. "Margaret," she said, "we need to talk. I know you've been going through the papers, but I think we need to sit down and work things out." I could hear the false sweetness in her tone, and it made my blood run cold. She wasn't calling to apologize or to make things right. She was calling to try and smooth things over, to convince me that everything was fine, that I should just back down. "I'm not interested in working things out with you, Romy," I said, my voice steady. "What you've been doing is wrong, and I won't stand for it anymore." There was a pause on the other end, and I could almost hear her trying to find the right words. "I don't know what you're talking about," she finally said, the sweetness in her voice slipping away. "You're just upset, and I understand that. But you have to understand, I'm just trying to help Wade. Help our family move forward." "Move forward," I repeated, my voice rising. "You're not helping anyone. You've been taking everything from me, and I'm not going to let you get away with it." There was silence on the other end of the line for a moment, and I could feel my heart racing. I wasn't sure if she was going to snap back, or if she was going to back down. But when she spoke again, her voice was different. It was colder, more calculating. "You don't know what you're dealing with, Margaret," she said, the threat in her voice clear. "I've made sure that everything is in place. You can't stop this. Wade and I are moving on, and there's nothing you can do to change that." I felt a surge of anger, but I kept my voice calm. "We'll see about that, Romy. I've already taken steps. You're not going to take everything from me without a fight." The line went quiet for a few seconds, and then Romy spoke again, her voice tight. "You think you're going to win, don't you? You're nothing but a bitter old woman who's clinging to something that doesn't matter anymore. You don't belong here. Wade and I are going to take care of this house, and you can leave whenever you're ready to stop making things difficult." I could feel my pulse pounding in my ears, but I refused to back down. "You're wrong," I said firmly. "This is my home. I built this family. I won't let you destroy everything Edward and I worked for." There was another long silence, and I could sense the tension building. I wasn't sure what would happen next, but I knew one thing for sure. Romy was scared. She wasn't used to someone standing up to her. She thought she could take control without resistance, but I wasn't going to let that happen. "You don't have to do this, Margaret," she said, almost pleading. "We can all move on, just let it go." "No," I replied, my voice steady. "I'm not going anywhere. You may have manipulated things so far, but I won't let you take what's mine. I've spent my whole life making sure this family stayed together. I'm not going to let you tear it apart now." There was another pause, longer this time, and I could feel the weight of the silence between us. Then Romy finally spoke again, her voice a low, angry hiss. "You'll regret this, Margaret. You're making a mistake. Wade will never forgive you." I felt a shiver run down my spine, but I didn't falter. "I'm not afraid of you, Romy," I said, my voice cold. "I've been fighting for this family for too long to let you destroy it now. I'll fight for what's right, no matter what." I hung up the phone without saying another word. As I sat there in the silence of the kitchen, I felt a strange sense of peace. It wasn't over yet. There was still a long road ahead, and I wasn't sure what the outcome would be. But one thing was certain. I wasn't backing down. I wasn't going to let Romy and Wade push me out of my own life. This was my home, my family, and I was going to fight for it, no matter what it took. I woke up that morning with a new sense of resolve. The weight of the previous weeks, the arguments, the betrayal, all of it had been building up. But today I wasn't going to let it control me anymore. I had made the decision to fight back, to take my life back into my own hands. I didn't know how long the fight would last or how hard it would be, but I knew one thing. I wasn't going to let Romy and Wade continue to treat me like I was invisible. I spent the morning going through the papers again, double-checking everything with my lawyer. The evidence was clear. Romy had manipulated the system, trying to seize control of everything Edward and I had built. It was time to make sure she didn't succeed. I could feel the anger bubbling up again as I thought about everything she had done. The lies, the manipulation, the way she had pushed me out of the family. But this time I was ready. I wasn't going to let her win. I wasn't going to back down. In the afternoon, I received a call from Wade. I could hear the hesitation in his voice, but I wasn't going to let him avoid the conversation any longer. "Mom," he said, his voice sounding strained, "I know things have been hard between us, but we need to talk. I want to fix this." His words seemed sincere, but I couldn't let myself be fooled. I had heard these apologies before. "Wade," I said, my voice calm but firm, "I'm not interested in fixing things with you and Romy unless you understand the truth. You've been letting her manipulate you, and you've been allowing her to take control of everything that's mine. This isn't just about the house, Wade. It's about my dignity." There was a long pause on the other end of the line, and I could hear him sigh. "I didn't mean for it to happen this way," he said, his voice soft. "I never wanted you to feel like this. But Romy and I, we thought it was the best thing for everyone." "The best thing for everyone?" I repeated, my voice rising with the frustration I had been holding in. "You think that pushing me out of my own life, my own home, is what's best? Do you think I've spent my entire life supporting this family, just to be discarded like this?" Wade was silent, and for the first time in weeks, I felt like he was really listening to me. "I don't know what to say, Mom," he said finally, his voice full of regret. "I didn't want this to happen. I don't want to lose you." "Then you need to stop letting her control everything," I said, my voice steady. "You need to stand up for what's right, not for her. You're my son, Wade. I raised you. Don't let her take everything from me." The line went silent again, and I waited, holding my breath. Finally, Wade spoke, his voice quiet but filled with a sense of finality. "I'll talk to Romy," he said. "We'll figure this out. I promise." I didn't know what that promise meant, but I had to take him at his word. I wasn't sure where it would lead, but I couldn't wait forever. I had my own life to live. A few days passed, and I didn't hear from Wade or Romy. The silence was deafening, but I didn't let it shake me. I kept going, kept fighting for what was mine. I kept my focus on the legal proceedings, making sure everything was in order, preparing for the next step. Then one evening Wade showed up at the door. He looked tired, his face drawn with worry. I could tell that something had changed. "Mom," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "I talked to Romy, and she's agreed to stop trying to sell the house. She says she was wrong, that she wants to make things right." I felt a wave of relief wash over me, but I didn't let my guard down. "I'm glad she's finally seeing the truth," I said, trying to keep my voice neutral. "But this isn't just about the house, Wade. This is about respect. This is about family." Wade nodded, his eyes filled with a mixture of guilt and hope. "I know, Mom. And I'm sorry. I should have seen it sooner. I'm not going to let her treat you like that again." I didn't know if I could fully forgive him yet, but it was a step in the right direction. It was a sign that maybe, just maybe, things could start to heal. The next few weeks were a slow process. Wade and I worked together to figure out what the next steps would be for the house, but it wasn't easy. Romy kept her distance, and I knew she wasn't happy about the situation. But I didn't care. I had fought for this, and I wasn't going to let her push me around anymore. Slowly, things began to fall into place. I was no longer just a bystander in my own life. I was taking control. I was making decisions for myself, standing up for myself, and finally putting myself first. It wasn't easy, but I knew it was the right thing to do. As the days passed, I started to feel a sense of peace returning. The house didn't feel as cold anymore. It was still the place where Edward and I had built our lives, but now it felt like my home again. I had fought for it, and I had won. I wasn't just living in the past anymore. I was living for today, for myself. I had found my strength again, and nothing, not Romy, not Wade, could take that away from me. I woke up that morning feeling a sense of calm I hadn't experienced in weeks. The fight wasn't over yet, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like I had control over my life again. I had made the decision to stand up for myself, to fight for what I had worked for, and to finally take back what was mine. The house, my home, was still mine, and no one, no matter how hard they tried, was going to take that away from me. Wade had come around, and while I didn't know if everything would go back to normal between us, I knew we were making progress. He had finally opened his eyes, seen the truth, and taken a stand for me. Romy, on the other hand, had retreated. She wasn't happy, but I could see the cracks in her facade. She had thought she could control everything, but she hadn't counted on me fighting back. The next few weeks were full of small victories. Wade and I worked together to sort out the legal mess that Romy had caused, and while it wasn't easy, we made progress. Every time I signed a document, every time I made a decision, I felt stronger. I wasn't just doing this for the house. I was doing it for myself. I was reclaiming my life, my power. Romy stayed quiet, and I knew it was only a matter of time before she made her next move. But I wasn't afraid of her anymore. I had already shown her that I wasn't someone to be underestimated. I wasn't just the quiet, submissive woman I had once been. I was Margaret Turner, and I wasn't going down without a fight. One afternoon, as I was going through some old family photos, I came across a picture of Edward and me from many years ago, before life had become so complicated. We looked so young, so full of hope. I stared at the photo for a long time, my fingers tracing the edges of the frame. It was a reminder of everything we had built together, everything I had fought for. And I realized something in that moment. No matter what happened, I had given it my all. I had fought for my family, for my marriage, and now I was fighting for myself. I wasn't going to let Romy or anyone else take that away from me. As the days turned into weeks, I began to notice changes in the house. The emptiness that had lingered since Edward's passing was starting to fade. It wasn't completely gone, but it felt different now. The house was mine again, and I was no longer just drifting through life. I was living it fully and completely. One evening, Wade came over to visit. We sat in the living room, just the two of us, a silence hanging between us. I could see that he still felt guilty about everything that had happened, but I also saw something else in him. He was finally seeing the bigger picture. He wasn't just looking at what had happened with Romy. He was seeing what I had been trying to protect all along. "Mom," he said, his voice soft. "I'm sorry for everything. For not standing up for you sooner. For letting things get so far out of hand." I didn't say anything right away. I just sat there looking at him. I had heard apologies before. But this time it felt different. This time it felt like he truly understood. "I don't know what to say, Wade," I replied after a moment, my voice steady but filled with emotion. "I don't know if I can forgive you right now, but I need you to understand something. This wasn't just about the house. It was about respect. You're my son, and I want to be a part of your life. But you have to stop letting her control you." Wade nodded, his eyes filled with regret. "I know, Mom. I've been stupid. I didn't see it before, but I see it now." I could feel the walls between us starting to come down. It wasn't going to be easy to rebuild everything, but I could tell he was finally ready to try. "I don't know what will happen with Romy," I said. "But I do know that I'm done being the one who gets pushed aside. I'm done being invisible." Wade looked at me, his eyes filled with both sorrow and understanding. "I know, Mom. I'll do better. I'll stand by you. I promise." It wasn't the perfect resolution, but it was a start. And for the first time in a long time, I believed him. The legal battle with Romy continued, but I wasn't afraid anymore. I had already won the most important fight. I had taken control of my life, and no one could take that away from me. Over time, the tension in the house began to ease. Romy still kept her distance, and I didn't know what her next move would be. But I knew that whatever happened, I was ready. I had spent too many years fighting for everyone else to let anyone take my place. The house, the family, my life, they were mine, and I wasn't going to let anyone take them away from me. As the days passed, I began to feel a sense of peace I hadn't known in years. It wasn't the same as before. It wasn't the life I had planned with Edward, but it was my life now, and I was reclaiming it. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew one thing. I was ready to face it. I had fought for myself, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was truly living again.